Do you want to know the fastest way to make someone regret losing you? It's not blocking them. It's not begging them. It's not chasing them. In fact, it's the complete opposite. And once you understand this, they'll feel your absence so deeply that it will echo louder than any words you could ever say. Blocking is often the first instinct people have when emotions are running high. It feels like power, it feels like control, it feels like a way of showing someone they no longer have access to you. But in reality, blocking is nothing more than an emotional outburst disguised as strength. It's not empowerment, it's escapism. Because when you block someone, what you are actually saying is, I cannot handle your presence, even from a distance. I cannot control myself if I see you. I cannot rise above this situation. And that statement, whether you realize it or not, puts the power in their hands. The moment you block them, you close the window, but you also close the opportunity for them to see what life looks like without their presence in it. You think you are protecting yourself, but what you are really doing is robbing them of the most valuable lesson, witnessing your absence while still being reminded of your existence. When you don't block, you allow them to watch. And this is not about playing games. This is about psychological reality. Human beings crave validation, and when they lose access to the very validation they once took for granted, they begin to feel the emptiness of that loss. Imagine this, someone who was used to your attention, your replies, your calls, your affection, suddenly finds silence. But instead of being blocked, where their ego can say, oh, they're bitter, they're hurt, they're obsessed, they are left with the haunting truth. You are still there, you are still visible, but you are no longer accessible. That burns far more deeply than any block ever could. You see, blocking allows them to create a narrative in their head. They can tell themselves he or she is still angry, they are still hurt, they can't handle seeing me. That fuels their ego. They start to believe you're not over them, that you're still emotionally entangled. But when you don't block, you deny them that comfort. You take away the excuse. You strip them of the story they want to tell themselves. Instead, you leave them with nothing but your silence, your indifference, and the visible growth of your life without them. And that unsettles them more than anything else. Think about it this way. When someone scrolls and they can still see you living, posting, smiling, moving forward, they can't deny your resilience. They can't deny that you're no longer pouring energy into them. And because they can see it, they're forced to process it. Blocking hides your progress. Not blocking makes them witness it. The more they watch, the heavier the realization becomes. You didn't collapse, you didn't beg, you didn't cling, you carried on. And that reminder hits them every single time your presence appears in their feed or in their mind. Another layer to this is control. The person who blocks often thinks they are taking back control, but in truth, they are operating from a place of lack of control. Blocking is like slamming a door when you're angry. It's impulsive, it's emotional, it's temporary relief. True control is when you don't have to slam the door at all. True control is when you can keep every door open and still not be tempted to walk through it. When you don't block, you're proving to yourself and to them that you are not controlled by emotional impulses. You can remain calm, collected, and detached, and that kind of power always unsettles the other side. And let's be very clear, this isn't about showing off to them. This isn't about waiting for them to notice. This is about sending a silent but powerful message. I am above this. Blocking drags you into the mud of emotions. Not blocking lifts you above the drama and places you in a space of quiet dominance. They will see you, and yet they won't have you. They will watch, but they won't reach you. They will feel your absence in your presence, and that paradox is what keeps echoing inside their mind. Begging is one of the fastest ways to strip yourself of dignity in a relationship dynamic. It might feel like desperation in the moment, but what it really communicates is this: my worth is dependent on your validation. And once you send that message, You create an unspoken imbalance. The other person suddenly holds all the power, while you're left in the position of chasing, pleading, and lowering your own value. Respect begins with how you allow yourself to be treated, but it also begins with what you tolerate from yourself. The second you beg for someone to stay, to care, to love you, you are signaling that you have abandoned yourself first before they ever did. What many people don't realize is that begging never changes someone's heart. It only feeds their ego. The more you beg, the more comfortable they become in thinking they are the prize, the authority, the one who decides whether or not you are good enough. Instead of inspiring them to love you again, it convinces them they were right to undervalue you in the first place. Because if you truly had worth, if you truly had self-respect, why would you need to chase something that should be freely given? Love, affection, and commitment cannot be forced. They can only be chosen. And when you beg, you are not giving them the opportunity to choose. You are trying to pull them into something they have already stepped away from. Respecting yourself first means understanding this truth. Your presence is a gift, not a negotiation. The moment you find yourself pleading for basic affection, you should pause and ask, why am I asking for something that should naturally flow in a healthy connection? If you are begging for attention, it means attention has been deliberately withdrawn. If you are begging for respect, it means disrespect has already been shown. If you are begging for love, it means love is no longer there. In every scenario, your energy is being wasted because you are trying to water a dead plant. And no matter how much effort you pour in, nothing will bloom. The psychology behind begging is rooted in fear, the fear of abandonment, the fear of being alone, the fear that you may not find someone else. But what you must realize is that every time you beg, you are reinforcing those fears inside yourself. You are training your mind to believe that you cannot survive without that person, that your happiness is tied to their decision, and that you are powerless without their approval. Over time, this destroys confidence, self-image, and emotional stability. And while you think you are holding on to love, what you are really holding on to is the illusion of security. Now imagine flipping that script. Instead of begging, you stand still. Instead of chasing, you pause. Instead of lowering your standards, you remind yourself of them. That silence speaks volumes. That lack of desperation reclaims balance. Because when someone expects you to fall apart and instead you stand tall, they are confronted with your strength. And that strength is not only magnetic, it is unforgettable. The people who beg are forgotten quickly, but the ones who walk away with grace remain in someone's memory far longer because they represented something rare in a world full of desperation, self-respect. Begging also has another hidden consequence. It pushes the other person further away. Nobody is attracted to desperation. Even if they once loved you, the more you plead, the more they feel suffocated. It reminds them why they left in the first place. It validates their decision to pull away, and it cements the idea that coming back would only trap them in a cycle of emotional pressure. But when you refuse to beg, you create space. Space for them to think, space for them to reflect, and most importantly, space for yourself to heal. That space is powerful because it allows clarity to return, and clarity always reveals the truth that fear tries to hide. Self-respect is not loud. It doesn't need grand gestures. It doesn't need to shout or perform. Self-respect is quiet, steady, and consistent. It is in the decision not to send that long text, not to make that phone call, not to cry in front of someone who already turned their back. It is in the decision to protect your dignity even when your heart aches. Because the reality is this: you cannot make someone value you by showing them how low you are willing to go. You make someone value you by showing them how high your standards are, even when it costs you their presence. There is a unique power in withdrawing your energy that no argument, no explanation, and no confrontation can ever match. People often underestimate the impact of absence because they are so focused on words, on proving their point, on making sure the other person understands how much they hurt them. But the truth is, the deepest lessons are never taught through speeches. They are felt in silence. When you withdraw your energy, you are removing something that cannot be replaced. Your attention, your affection, your presence, these are currencies. And when they are no longer given freely, the loss creates an emptiness that echoes louder than anything you could ever say. Withdrawal is not about punishing the other person. It is not about manipulation or trying to force them into regret. It is about reclaiming your power and redirecting it toward yourself. When you stop calling, stop texting, stop explaining, you are sending a message without words. I have chosen myself over this chaos. And whether they admit it or not, people feel the difference immediately. The constant supply of attention they once consumed without gratitude is suddenly gone. The validation they relied on has disappeared. The ego that was once fed daily begins to starve, and it is in that starvation that realization begins. What makes withdrawal so powerful is that it shifts the dynamic completely. As long as you are available, as long as you are trying, as long as you are putting energy into keeping the connection alive, the other person feels secure. They know no matter how they treat you, you will still be there, ready to give, ready to forgive, ready to try again. But the moment you withdraw, that safety net is cut. The security they felt turns into uncertainty. The comfort of always having access to you transforms into the discomfort of wondering if they have lost you for good. And that discomfort is what awakens them in a way your presence never could. There is also a psychological shift that happens when you withdraw. Human beings naturally crave what they no longer have access to. The mind exaggerates the value of what is missing because the absence creates a vacuum. When you are constantly present, they normalize you. They take you for granted because they know you're there. But when you remove yourself, even subtly, the brain begins to obsess. It starts replaying memories, questioning decisions, and searching for the very thing it once dismissed. Your withdrawal triggers reflection. It forces them to see what life actually feels like without your presence. And often, it is in that moment of withdrawal that the true weight of your worth hits them. The power of withdrawal also lies in its consistency. It is not about disappearing for a few days just to come back with the same old energy. That only teaches them that your silence is temporary, that they can wait it out until you break. Real withdrawal is when you make a conscious decision to stop feeding what drains you, and you stick to it long enough for the message to sink in. It is in the consistency of your absence that the reality of their loss becomes undeniable. And the longer you maintain it, the more they feel the gap. For you, withdrawal is also a healing process. Every ounce of energy you used to pour into them is now available for you. The time you spent checking your phone, waiting for replies, replaying conversations, you reclaim all of it. And once you redirect it, you begin to see transformation. You begin to feel stronger, more grounded, more focused. Because the truth is, chasing and clinging is exhausting, but withdrawal brings peace. It removes you from emotional chaos and places you back into alignment with yourself. And nothing is more powerful than that state of inner stability. One of the most underestimated moves after heartbreak, rejection, or disappointment is to take all of the energy you once poured into another person and invest it back into yourself. But the key is doing it quietly, without announcement, without performance, without trying to prove anything. Silence in self-upgrade is powerful because it allows growth to unfold naturally. And when the results begin to show, they speak louder than any status update, any picture, or any indirect message ever could. When you begin upgrading yourself in silence, you are shifting the spotlight back where it belongs, on your own life. When people go through breakups or rejection, the first instinct is often to showcase change. They post about how strong they are, they flaunt a new look, they make loud declarations of independence. But when you are loud about transformation, it often comes across as performance. It's not for yourself, it's for the one you want to notice. True growth doesn't need an audience, and it doesn't beg for validation. When you upgrade yourself in silence, the change is authentic, not staged. It is happening because you value yourself enough to evolve, not because you want someone else to see it. And that difference in intention is what makes the transformation so magnetic. The beauty of silent self-upgrade is that it's invisible at first. Nobody sees the hours you put in at the gym, the nights you spend studying, the discipline it takes to save money instead of wasting it, the courage it takes to build new routines. They don't see the struggle, but eventually they will see the results. And results are undeniable. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to prove your worth through words. The results of your quiet effort speak louder than anything else. And when the person who underestimated you finally notices, it hits differently because they realize you didn't grow for them, you grew for yourself. Another reason silence is so important in upgrading yourself is because it protects your energy from unnecessary judgment or sabotage. When you announce your plans, people project doubts, fears, and negativity. They might mock you, discourage you, or secretly hope you fail. But when you stay silent, you deny them that power. You work in the shadows, away from the noise, building piece by piece until the foundation is solid. Then, by the time anyone realizes how far you've come, it's too late for their negativity to affect you. They are left with no choice but to respect what you've become. There is also a psychological impact on the person who once overlooked you. When you vanish into silence, they may expect you to crumble. They may believe you are still stuck, still waiting, still orbiting around them. But then, slowly, they begin to notice changes. You look healthier. Your confidence feels different. Your life seems fuller. And what stings the most is that they weren't part of the process. They don't know how you did it. They don't know who influenced you. And they don't know what your next move will be. That mystery creates intrigue. The silence surrounding your upgrade makes them curious, and curiosity always leads to reflection. Upgrading yourself in silence is not about revenge. It's about self-respect. It's about saying, even if nobody claps, I will still rise. Because growth that happens for applause fades when the applause stops. But growth that happens in silence is permanent because it was never for anyone else to begin with. It becomes part of who you are, not just something you show. And the deeper you commit to this, the more unshakable your value becomes. When you quietly upgrade yourself, you also attract better energy into your life. You begin to see opportunities that you couldn't notice before because you were too consumed with someone else. You meet new people, you build new habits, and you realize that your life was never supposed to be stuck in that one chapter. Silence creates space for self-discovery, and in that discovery, you find strength you didn't know you had. Anyone can go silent for a week. Anyone can hold back from sending that text for a few days. Anyone can post pictures looking happy right after a breakup. But consistency is what separates real power from temporary performance. The ego of the person who left, the one who thought you'd always be there, thrives on the belief that your silence is just a phase, that your strength is just a front, and that eventually you will break. This is why consistency is so threatening. When you maintain your distance, your discipline, and your calm over weeks, months, and even years, it destroys the ego's illusion that you will come running back the moment they snap their fingers. The ego feeds on predictability. If you've always been the one to check in, to apologize first, to send long messages, then their confidence rests on the assumption that you will keep repeating that pattern. So when you suddenly withdraw, they don't panic immediately. Their ego whispers, just wait, they'll be back. This is temporary. They can't go long without me. And this is why the first few weeks don't hit them the hardest. They still believe you're stuck in the same cycle. But when consistency proves them wrong, when weeks stretch into months and your silence doesn't break, that is when their ego begins to crack. Because nothing bruises pride more deeply than realizing the person they thought depended on them has learned how to live completely without them. Consistency is powerful because it leaves no room for doubt. If you disappear for a short while and then return, you only reinforce their sense of control. They may even mock you in their head, I knew it. They can't resist. They always come back. Every relapse feeds their confidence. But when you remain consistent, when you prove with your actions that you are no longer willing to participate in the same unhealthy dance, it forces them to confront reality. They cannot explain it away, they cannot excuse it as a moment of anger, and they cannot soothe themselves with the thought that you're still waiting. Consistency denies their ego the satisfaction of being right. The longer you stay consistent, the more the silence becomes undeniable. At first, they may even enjoy the space, thinking it validates their decision to leave. But slowly, as time passes, the absence begins to weigh heavier. They start to notice what's missing, the texts that no longer come, the comfort of knowing you're always available, the validation they once consumed without effort. And when they realize that you are not breaking that silence, that you are no longer orbiting around them, the discomfort deepens into regret. They don't just miss you. They begin to miss the version of themselves that only existed when they had you. Consistency also transforms you in the process. It teaches you patience, discipline, and emotional control. Every day you don't give in, you are proving to yourself that you are stronger than your impulses. You begin to realize that you don't need their validation, you don't need their attention, and you don't need their approval to feel valuable. And that realization builds an inner confidence that radiates outward. The more consistent you are, the more magnetic you become, because consistency reflects stability, and stability is attractive in a world full of emotional chaos. What unsettles the other person the most is not just your silence, it's your silence sustained over time, because consistency communicates something words never could. You've actually moved on, not pretending, not performing, not waiting in the background, but truly redirecting your life in a new direction. And when they finally understand that you are no longer playing the role they expected, the ego shatters. It cannot reconcile the image of you as dependent with the reality of you as independent. And that realization forces them to see your value in a way they never did when you were available. Words are cheap. You can write the longest text. You can deliver the most emotional speech. You can cry. You can plead. You can explain every detail of how much you were hurt. But in the end, words rarely change anything. In fact, the more you try to convince someone of your worth with words, the more they tune you out. They hear desperation, not value. They hear pleading, not power. They hear an argument, not evidence. That's because words are easy to dismiss, actions are not. This is why letting your life prove your worth is the ultimate response when someone underestimates you, leaves you, or chooses someone else. Life becomes your loudest answer, and the beauty of it is you don't even need to direct it at them. You simply live, and the results speak for themselves. When you let life prove your worth, you stop trying to change their perspective directly. You no longer make it your mission to convince them that they made a mistake. You redirect your mission inward, toward building the kind of life that speaks volumes without you ever having to open your mouth. And here's the irony: the less you try to prove something, the more undeniable the proof becomes. Because true worth is not declared, it is demonstrated. When you begin focusing on your growth, your success, your health, your peace, and your happiness, those who doubted you are forced to confront the reality of who you are becoming. The impact of this is psychological. People expect you to remain in the same place where they left you. They expect you to still be hurting.